digital clock on my computer screen glowed 11:47 p.m. as I sat alone on the 32nd floor of the Meridian Financial Tower. The silence was so thick you could almost taste it. My name is David Thompson, and I had been working as a senior analyst at Goldman and Associates for 3 years. Tonight was different, though. Tonight felt wrong. The office building stretched endlessly into the Manhattan darkness, its windows reflecting the distant city lights like watching eyes. I was the only soul left in this corporate tomb, or so I thought. My fingers moved across the keyboard, the soft clicking echoing through the empty corridors. I was rushing to finish the quarterly report that my boss, Jonathan Williams, had demanded by morning. The pressure was immense. One mistake could cost me everything. That's when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of typing came from somewhere behind me, from the maze of empty cubicles that stretched across the floor like a graveyard of dreams. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. I stopped typing immediately. The silence returned, but only for a moment. Then I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. Someone else was working late tonight. Hello, I called out, my voice cracking slightly. Is someone there? The typing stopped. I slowly turned in my chair, peering over the partition walls. The office was dark, illuminated only by the emergency exit signs and the glow from my monitor. Row after row of empty desks stretched before me like tombstones. But something was wrong. Something was terribly wrong. My heart began to pound as I remembered something crucial. The building manager, Robert Anderson, had sent an email earlier that day. Due to electrical maintenance, the power to floors 30 through 35 would be shut off at 9 p.m. sharp. That was almost 3 hours ago. If the power was shut off, how was my computer still running? How were the emergency lights still on? And who, or what, was typing in the darkness? If you didn't forget, then subscribe to our channel for more true office horror stories from New York. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and dialed building security. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. No answer. The silence on the other end felt like a void trying to swallow me whole. Tap, tap, tap. There it was again. Closer this time. Much closer. I forced myself to stand up, my legs shaking like leaves in a storm. This is impossible, I whispered to myself. Someone's playing a prank. Has to be. But deep down, I knew this was no prank. I began walking toward the sound, each step feeling like I was walking toward my own grave. The carpet muffled my footsteps, but I could hear my heart thundering in my chest. The typing continued, steady and rhythmic, like a death march. As I moved through the cubicles, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. Papers were scattered across several desks. Financial reports, just like the one I was working on. But these papers were yellow with age, covered in dust. How long had they been here? I picked up one of the documents. The date read March 15th, 1987, 37 years ago. The name at the bottom made my blood freeze. Completed by employee number 247, classified. Employee number 247. That was MY employee number. The typing grew louder now, more urgent. It was coming from the corner cubicle, the one everyone in the office avoided, the one that had been empty since I started working here. They said someone died there once, a man named Christopher Hamilton, who worked himself to death during the stock market crash. But that was just an office legend, wasn't it? I crept closer, my breathing shallow and rapid. The fluorescent light above the cubicle flickered sporadically, casting twisted shadows on the walls. And then I saw him. A figure sat hunched over an old computer terminal, his fingers moving across a keyboard that wasn't there. His clothes were dated, a gray suit from decades past. His hair was thin and unkempt. But the most terrifying thing was his face. He had no face. Where his features should have been was just smooth, pale skin. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just emptiness. But somehow, I could feel him looking at me. The typing stopped. Slowly, impossibly, the figure turned toward me. Though he had no mouth, I heard a voice, a whisper that seemed to come from the walls themselves. You're still here. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. "This isn't real," I gasped. "This can't be real." But the figure stood up, and I could see right through him to the wall behind. He was transparent, like smoke-given form. "You cannot leave," the voice continued, growing stronger. "None of us can leave." That's when I noticed them. Other figures, dozens of them, sitting at desks throughout the office, all translucent, all faceless, all typing on keyboards that existed only in their memory. The ghosts of Wall Street, the souls of those who had died working in this building, trapped forever in their cubicles, still trying to meet deadlines that no longer mattered. I ran. I ran like I had never run before, my footsteps echoing through the haunted halls. Behind me, I could hear the symphony of typing growing louder and louder, as if the entire building was alive with the sounds of the dead. I reached the elevator and frantically pushed the button. Nothing happened. The power was still off. The stairs. I had to take the stairs. 32 flights down seemed like an eternity as I raced through the stairwell. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I couldn't stop. I could hear them following me. The soft whisper of footsteps, the ghostly murmur of voices. "Don't leave us alone. Join us. Work with us forever." I burst through the stairwell door, gasping for air. But I wasn't on the ground floor. I was back on the 32nd floor. Impossible. I tried again, running down flight after flight of stairs. But every door I opened led back to the same floor, the same office, the same nightmare. I was trapped. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time had lost all meaning in this place. I found myself sitting at my desk again, staring at the computer screen. The report was still incomplete. Around me, the ghostly employees continued their eternal work. The sound of typing filled the air like a twisted lullaby. And slowly, I began to understand. This building was alive. It fed on the souls of those who worked themselves to death within its walls. Christopher Hamilton had been the first, but not the last. I looked down at my hands and felt my heart stop. They were becoming transparent. "No," I whispered. "No, this can't be happening." But it was. I could feel myself fading, becoming one of them. My fingers moved to the keyboard, and I began to type. The report had to be finished. The work had to go on. The sun rose over Manhattan, casting long shadows through the office windows. But I could no longer feel its warmth. I was cold now, so very cold. By 9 a.m., when the cleaning crew arrived, they found nothing unusual, just an empty office, ready for another day of work, another day of souls to claim. They found my abandoned coffee cup, still warm. My computer was on, displaying a completed quarterly report, but there was no sign of David Thompson. The building manager, Robert Anderson, updated the employee records. Employee number 247 was marked as terminated and no notice. But late at night, when the office grows quiet, you can still hear the typing, the endless, rhythmic tap-tap-tap of keyboards that exist only in the realm of the dead. And sometimes, security guards report seeing a young man in a rumpled suit, sitting at a desk on the 32nd floor, working late, always working late. He looks up when they approach, and where his face should be, there is nothing, just smooth, pale skin, and a voice that whispers from the walls themselves. The report must be finished. The work must go on. They say the Meridian Financial Tower is still hiring. The turnover rate is remarkably high, especially for the night shift positions. But they always need someone willing to work late, someone willing to stay until the job is done. Someone willing to join the ranks of the last employees on Wall Street. The building is still there, 32 floors of glass and steel reaching toward the sky. And every night, the lights come on by themselves. The computers boot up without human hands. And the typing begins again. Tap, tap, tap. Because in the world of finance, the work never ends. Even death can't stop a deadline. Even death can't free you from the office. This was a true story from the financial district of Manhattan. If you've experienced something similar or work in one of these old office buildings, remember to leave before dark. And if you hear typing from empty cubicles, don't investigate. Just run, because some employees never get to go home. Subscribe to our channel for more real horror stories from offices around the world. These stories are based on actual events reported by workers who escaped to tell their tales. Sweet dreams, and remember to always check the building's power schedule before working late. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding that seemed to echo longer than usual in the empty hallway. Catherine stepped out, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor of the 47th floor. The sound bounced off the walls, creating an unsettling rhythm that made her skin crawl. It was past midnight, and Whitman and Associates should have been completely deserted. But Catherine had received an urgent email from her supervisor, demanding she retrieve critical files from the conference room. The message had been strange, almost desperate in tone. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting dancing shadows across the pristine corporate walls. Catherine pulled her coat tighter around herself as she walked down the corridor. The heating system seemed to be malfunctioning, leaving the air uncomfortably cold. As she approached Conference Room B, she noticed something odd. The door was slightly ajar, even though security protocols required all rooms to be locked after hours. A thin sliver of pale light spilled out into the hallway. Catherine pushed the door open slowly. The room was empty, but the projector was still running, displaying a blank white screen that bathed everything in an eerie glow. The chairs were arranged perfectly around the mahogany table, as if waiting for a meeting that would never begin. She moved quickly to the filing cabinet, searching for the documents she needed. That's when she heard it, the soft sound of footsteps in the hallway behind her. Catherine froze. The building was supposed to be empty. Security had confirmed that she was the only person with access tonight. The footsteps grew louder, more deliberate. They stopped directly outside the conference room door. "Hello," Catherine called out, her voice trembling slightly. "Is someone there?" Silence. She waited for what felt like an eternity before cautiously stepping toward the door. The hallway beyond was completely empty, stretching in both directions without a single sign of life. But as Catherine turned back to the filing cabinet, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. There, on the polished surface of the conference table, were wet footprints leading from the door to where she stood. The next morning, Catherine tried to convince herself it had all been her imagination. She arrived at work early, hoping to catch her supervisor James Morrison and ask about the urgent email. But when she checked her inbox again, the message was gone. "I never sent you any email last night," James told her, looking genuinely confused. "And why would I ask you to come in after midnight? That's highly irregular." Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. If James hadn't sent the email, then who had? Over the next few days, she began asking her colleagues about the 47th floor. The responses were troubling. David Chun from accounting mentioned that he sometimes worked late and had seen strange lights flickering in the conference rooms after hours. "I always assumed it was the cleaning crew," he said. "But when I asked building management, they told me the cleaning happens during the day shift." Lisa Rodriguez from HR shared an even more disturbing story. "Last month, I was working overtime when I heard what sounded like a meeting happening in conference room A. Multiple voices, chairs scraping against the floor, even what sounded like someone giving a presentation. But when I went to check, the room was completely empty and locked." The most unsettling account came from Thomas Anderson, a security consultant who had been hired to review the building's safety protocols. "I've been going through the security footage from the past 6 months," he told Catherine quietly. "There are anomalies on the 47th floor, figures appearing in the hallway cameras that don't show up on the elevator logs. It's as if people are materializing out of thin air." Catherine felt her hands begin to shake. "What kind of figures?" Thomas hesitated before answering. "Shadows. Tall, elongated shadows that seem to pace back and forth near the conference rooms. They appear most frequently between midnight and 3 a.m. That evening, Catherine found herself staying late at the office again. This time, it wasn't because of any mysterious email. She needed to know the truth. As the clock approached midnight, she positioned herself at her desk with a clear view of the conference room hallway. She had borrowed a high-powered flashlight from the security desk and kept her phone ready to record anything unusual. At exactly 12:17 a.m., the fluorescent lights began to flicker in their familiar, unsettling pattern. The temperature in the office seemed to drop several degrees, and Catherine could see her breath forming small clouds in the air. Then she saw IT. A tall, dark figure emerged from the wall near conference room B. It moved with purpose, pacing back and forth in front of the door, as if waiting for someone. The figure appeared to be wearing a business suit, but its features were completely obscured by darkness. Catherine fumbled for her phone, her hands trembling as she tried to start recording. But as soon as the camera app opened, the figure stopped pacing and turned directly toward her. Even though she couldn't make out any facial features, Catherine felt certain the entity was staring at her. The sensation was overwhelming, like being examined by something that shouldn't exist. The figure began moving toward her desk with slow, deliberate steps. Catherine grabbed her belongings and ran for the elevator, not daring to look back until the doors closed safely behind her. The next day, she decided to research the history of the building. What she discovered in the public records made her stomach turn. 15 years ago, there had been a tragedy on the 47th floor. A late-night meeting had been called to discuss emergency layoffs due to a major client pulling out unexpectedly. 7 employees had gathered in conference room B to review termination lists and discuss damage control. But the meeting had ended in disaster. A disgruntled employee named Michael Richardson, who had discovered his name on the termination list, had brought a weapon to the office. The confrontation had resulted in multiple casualties before Richardson had taken his own life. The entire floor had been renovated afterward, and the company had tried to move past the incident. But according to the records, there had been ongoing reports of strange occurrences ever since. Catherine printed out the old news articles and employee records, her hands shaking as she read the details. The victims had included department heads, managers, and Richardson himself. All of them had died in or near conference room B, the same room where she had encountered the mysterious email and wet footprints. As she was gathering her research, her computer screen flickered. A new email appeared in her inbox from an address she didn't recognize. Richardson at WhitmanAssociates.com. The subject line read, "Urgent, meeting tonight, 47th floor." Catherine's blood turned to ice. According to the records, Michael Richardson's employee email had been deactivated the day after the tragedy. There was no way he could be sending messages from that account. But as she stared at the screen, more emails began appearing. Messages from Jennifer Walsh, Robert Kim, Angela Torres, and others, all names from the casualty list, all requesting her presence at a midnight meeting in conference room B. Catherine grabbed her coat and ran from the building, but she knew she couldn't run forever. Whatever was happening on the 47th floor, it seemed to be intensifying. The shadows were reaching out, trying to draw her into their eternal meeting. She spent the weekend researching paranormal investigators and psychic mediums, desperate for answers. Most dismissed her story, but one investigator, Patricia Holmes, agreed to meet with her. Traumatic events can leave impressions on a location, Patricia explained. Strong emotions, particularly fear, anger, and desperation, can create what we call residual hauntings. The spirits aren't necessarily malicious, but they're trapped in a loop, endlessly repeating the moments before their death. But why are they reaching out to me? Catherine asked. Patricia studied the printed emails and news articles. Sometimes, when a haunting becomes more active, it means the spirits are trying to communicate something important. They might need help finding peace, or there could be unfinished business that needs to be resolved. What kind of unfinished business? In cases involving workplace violence, there are often underlying issues that were never addressed. Cover-ups, negligence, corruption, things that contributed to the tragedy but were swept under the rug during the investigation. Catherine felt a chill of realization. She had always wondered why her company had been so secretive about the 47th floor's history. Most employees didn't even know about the incident. That Monday, she began her own investigation into the events surrounding the tragedy. Using her access to company records and her connections in different departments, She started piecing together information that had been deliberately obscured. What she discovered was shocking. The emergency meeting hadn't been called because of a client pulling out. According to internal memos that had somehow survived the record purge, the company had been embezzling money from client accounts, cover massive losses from illegal investments. When the scheme began to unravel, management had decided to pin the blame on several department heads and fire them as scapegoats. Michael Richardson hadn't just been a disgruntled employee facing termination. He had been the whistleblower who had discovered the embezzlement scheme. The midnight meeting was supposed to be where management convinced him to stay quiet in exchange for keeping his job. But Richardson had refused to participate in the cover-up. The confrontation had escalated when he threatened to go public with evidence of the company's crimes. Catherine realized the official story of a mentally unstable employee going on a rampage had been completely fabricated. Richardson and the others had died because they had tried to do the right thing, and their deaths had been used to bury the truth permanently. As she compiled her evidence, the paranormal activity on the 47th floor intensified. Other employees began reporting strange encounters, phones ringing with calls from disconnected numbers, elevators stopping on the 47th floor even when no one had pressed a button, conference room doors found wide open despite being locked the night before. The shadows were becoming more persistent, more visible. David Chun reported seeing full figures in business attire, standing in the hallway during his late-night shifts. Lisa Rodriguez found documents on her desk that she hadn't placed there, all relating to the company's financial irregularities from 15 years ago. Catherine knew she had to act. The spirits weren't malicious. They were desperate. They had been trying to expose the truth for 15 years. But no one had been willing to listen. She contacted Patricia Holmes again, and together they planned a way to help the trapped souls find peace. On a Friday night, Catherine returned to the 47th floor one final time. She brought with her copies of all the evidence she had gathered, the real story of what had happened that night 15 years ago. As midnight approached, the familiar signs began. The lights flickered, the temperature dropped, and the shadows emerged from the walls. But this time, Catherine didn't run. She walked calmly to conference room B and placed her evidence on the table. "I know what really happened here," she said to the empty room. "I know you were trying to do the right thing. I know you were murdered for trying to expose the truth." The air in the room seemed to shimmer, and gradually, the shadows began to take more solid form. Catherine could make out the faces of the victims, their expressions no longer twisted with anger and fear, but filled with hope. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows the real story," Catherine promised. "Your deaths won't be meaningless. The truth will finally come out." One by one, the figures nodded to her, their forms becoming lighter, more translucent. A sense of profound peace filled the conference room as the spirits finally found the resolution they had been seeking. By morning, the evidence was in the hands of federal investigators and journalists. The embezzlement scandal that had been buried for 15 years was finally exposed. Several high-ranking executives were arrested, and the families of the victims received the justice they had been denied. The 47th floor of the Whitman and Associates building became quiet after that. No more mysterious emails, no more pacing shadows, no more wet footprints on conference tables. Catherine continued working in the building, but she often thought about that final night in conference room B. Sometimes, when she worked late, she could swear she felt a gentle presence watching over her, as if grateful spirits were ensuring that no one would ever again suffer the fate of those who had tried to speak the truth. The conference room itself was eventually converted into a memorial space, with a small plaque honoring the victims. It read, "In memory of those who died seeking justice, may their courage inspire others to always stand for what is right." But late at night, employees still reported seeing faint, peaceful figures in the memorial room, no longer pacing with restless energy, but standing calmly as guardians, making sure that the truth they had died to protect would never again be buried in the shadows. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the empty corridors of Meridian Financial Services, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. 27 floors above the bustling streets of Brooklyn, the building stood like a monolith against the night sky, its windows glowing dimly in the darkness. The city below pulsed with life even at this ungodly hour. But up here, in this corporate tower that housed dozens of companies, silence reigned supreme. It was 2:47 a.m. when the first sound echoed through the silence. A mechanical whirring, slow at first, then growing steadily louder, like some ancient beast awakening from a deep slumber. James Morrison, the night security guard, paused his rounds on the 15th floor. He had been working these halls for 3 years now, ever since moving to New York from a small hometown in Ohio. And he knew every sound this building made. The elevators had their distinctive hum that echoed through the shaft at all hours. The air conditioning units had their rhythmic cycling that changed with the seasons. Even the water pipes had their occasional groans when the temperature dropped too quickly. The building was like a living organism, and James had learned its language of mechanical whispers and electronic sighs. But this sound was different. This sound was coming from somewhere high above him, drifting down through the ventilation system like a ghost seeking the living. This sound was coming from the 23rd floor. James pressed the elevator button, his reflection staring back at him from the polished steel doors. At 42 years old, he had the weathered face of a man who had seen too much of the world's darkness. His security uniform was pressed and clean, his badge polished to a shine, but his eyes held the weary look of someone who had learned not to trust the quiet moments. The building felt different tonight, heavier somehow, as if the very air was thick with anticipation, pregnant with possibilities that made his skin crawl. When the doors finally opened with their familiar ding, he stepped inside and pressed 23. The elevator lurched upward with mechanical precision, and James watched the floor numbers climb slowly on the digital display. Each floor passed like a heartbeat. 16, 17, 18. The building was mostly empty at this hour, save for a few die-hard accountants and lawyers working late into the night. But even they had gone home by now. The sound grew louder as he ascended, filtering through the elevator's shaft like distant thunder. By the time he reached the 23rd floor, the mechanical whirring had become a steady rhythm, punctuated by the distinctive thunk-click of papers being processed, sorted, and dispensed. James knew that sound well. It was unmistakably the old Xerox machine in the main office suite. The Workcenter 7845 had been installed when the building was renovated 5 years ago, a massive industrial copier capable of processing thousands of documents per hour. During the day, it ran almost constantly, feeding the endless appetite for paperwork that drove corporate America. But why would anyone be making copies at 3 in the morning? The elevator doors slid open with their pneumatic whisper, revealing the darkened reception area of Henderson and Associates, a mid-sized accounting firm that occupied the entire 23rd floor. The company had been in business for over 30 years, handling tax preparation and financial consulting for small businesses throughout the tri-state area. Their client list included restaurants, retail stores, construction companies, and dozens of other enterprises that formed the backbone of the regional economy. The only light came from the emergency exit signs, casting an eerie red glow across the empty desks and silent computer monitors. Shadows stretched across the carpeted floor like dark fingers reaching toward him. The receptionist's desk stood empty, her computer screen black, her chair pushed neatly under the workspace. Everything looked exactly as it should at this hour, neat, organized, and completely abandoned. The sound was definitely coming from the back office, beyond the maze of cubicles where the junior accountants worked during the day. James made his way through the darkened workspace, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The copying sounds grew louder with each step, accompanied now by the faint smell of hot toner and heated paper that always lingered around busy copy machines. The scent brought back memories of his previous job at a small insurance office in Cleveland, where he had spent countless hours feeding documents through similar machines, watching endless streams of paper emerge with mechanical precision. As he rounded the corner near the supply closet, he could see light spilling from beneath the door of the copy room, a thin golden line that seemed to pulse with each mechanical cycle. The light was too bright, too consistent to be coming from the machine's small display panel. It was as if someone had turned on every light in the room and left them blazing. He knocked softly on the door, his knuckles rapping against the wood in the standard security rhythm. 3 quick taps, pause. 2 more taps. No response. The machine continued its relentless operation, the rhythm never wavering, never pausing, as consistent as a mechanical heartbeat. James tried the door handle. It turned easily, and the door swung open on well-oiled hinges to reveal a sight that made his blood run cold and his rational mind struggle to process what he was seeing. The massive Xerox Workcenter 7845 stood in the center of the room like some technological altar, its digital display glowing bright blue in the darkness. The machine was at least 6 feet tall and nearly as wide, a monument to corporate efficiency that dominated the space around it. Papers were shooting out of the output tray in a steady stream, each sheet pristine white and perfectly aligned. But there was no one operating the machine, no original document in the feeder tray, no one standing anywhere near it. The room was completely empty except for the machine itself and the growing mountain of papers scattered across the floor. Yet it continued to produce copy after copy after copy, drawing from some invisible source that defied explanation. James approached the machine cautiously, his security training kicking in despite the surreal nature of the situation. The papers scattered across the floor were all identical in size and format, standard 8.5 by 11-inch sheets with typed text, each bearing the official letterhead of Henderson and Associates. The company logo, a stylized H&A surrounded by a circle of stars, was printed in deep blue ink at the top of each page. He picked up the nearest sheet and held it under the machine's built-in LED work light, which cast harsh shadows across his face as he read. His hands began to tremble as the words registered in his mind. The document was a resignation letter, formatted in standard business style, with proper spacing and professional language. Dear Management, it read in Times New Roman font. Please accept this letter as my formal notice of resignation from my position as senior accountant at Henderson and Associates. My last day of employment will be today. I will not be returning to collect my personal belongings, nor will I be available for an exit interview or transition meetings. Please consider this my final communication with the company. I thank you for the opportunity to work here, but circumstances beyond my control require my immediate departure. It was signed David Thompson, in what appeared to be handwritten script, though the signature had been reproduced with the mechanical precision of a printer. James recognized the name immediately. David Thompson had been one of the firm's most reliable employees, a quiet man in his mid-30s who specialized in small business tax returns. He had worked the cubicle near the window, always arriving early and staying late during tax season. His desk had been cluttered with family photos, a wife, 2 young children, and a golden retriever named Max. David had been the kind of employee that companies build their reputation on. Dependable, accurate, and completely dedicated to his work, until he had simply vanished 3 weeks ago. One day he was at his desk at 7 a.m., working on the quarterly reports for a chain of local restaurants, and the next day he was gone. No phone call, no explanation, no forwarding address. His desk had been cleared out completely. Family photos, the personal coffee mug, the small cactus he had kept by his computer monitor. Everything had been removed with surgical precision, as if David Thompson had never existed at all. But no one remembered seeing him pack his things. No one remembered saying goodbye. He had simply vanished between one day and the next, leaving behind only questions and a mysteriously empty workspace. The machine continued to churn out papers, each sheet identical to the last, feeding from an endless supply that seemed to materialize from nowhere. James picked up another sheet from the growing pile on the floor. Same format, same professional language, different name. Alexandra Bennett. Alexandra had disappeared 6 weeks ago under identical circumstances. She had been a junior accountant fresh out of college, enthusiastic and eager to prove herself in the corporate world. Her cubicle had been decorated with motivational posters and pictures from her recent graduation ceremony. She had talked constantly about her student loans, her new apartment in Queens, her plans to earn her CPA certification within 2 years. Then one Monday morning, she simply wasn't there. Her desk was empty. Her computer had been wiped clean, and her employee ID card had been deactivated. The personnel department claimed to have received a resignation letter via email, but when James had asked to see it, they couldn't locate it in their files. Another sheet from the floor. Michael Rodriguez. Michael had vanished 8 weeks ago. He had been the office manager, responsible for coordinating schedules, managing supplies, and handling the day-to-day operations that kept Henderson and Associates running smoothly. A family man with 3 teenage daughters. He had coached Little League baseball on weekends and volunteered at his church's food bank every month. His office walls had been covered with certificates of appreciation from various community organizations. The pattern was becoming horrifyingly clear with each document James examined. He grabbed handful after handful of papers from the floor, his movements becoming more frantic as the implications sank in. Every single document was a resignation letter, formatted identically, using the same professional language and formal tone. Every single name belonged to someone who had mysteriously disappeared from Henderson and Associates over the past several months. Thomas Wilson, gone 4 months ago. He had been the firm's IT specialist, responsible for maintaining their computer systems and protecting their client data. A quiet man who preferred the company of machines to people. He had worked late most nights, often staying until the cleaning crew arrived. Jennifer Davis vanished 5 months ago. She had been the receptionist, the friendly face who greeted clients and managed the phones. Her desk drawers had been filled with thank you cards from grateful clients and pictures of her 2 cats, Whiskers and Shadow. Robert Chun disappeared 6 months ago. Senior partner, co-founder of the firm with Henderson himself. His corner office had been filled with awards, diplomas, and photographs from 30 years of business relationships. His absence had been the most shocking of all, because partners don't just quit successful firms without explanation. Patricia Johnson, Christopher Lee, William Anderson, Stephanie Wright, Kevin Murphy, Rachel Thompson, all gone, all vanished without a trace, all documented with identical resignation letters that claimed immediate departure with no forwarding information, and the machine kept printing, each new sheet adding to the growing evidence of systematic disappearances that stretched back far longer than James had realized. James fumbled for his radio with shaking hands, his fingers struggling with the clip on his belt. Control, this is Morrison on 23. I need backup up here immediately. Something seriously wrong with the copy machine in the Henderson office. Static crackled through the speaker, harsh and distorted like voices speaking from a great distance. Then silence, complete and absolute, as if the building itself had absorbed his transmission. He tried again, pressing the button firmly and speaking directly into the microphone. Control, do you copy? This is Morrison requesting immediate assistance on floor 23. Nothing but the endless mechanical rhythm of the copy machine. James examined his radio, checking the battery indicator and antenna position. Everything appeared normal, the green light showing full power and proper connection to the building's communications system. But when he tried to transmit again, his voice seemed to disappear into the electronic void, swallowed by some invisible force that prevented his calls from reaching the outside world. The machine's rhythm seemed to accelerate slightly, papers flying out faster now, scattering across the floor like autumn leaves caught in a windstorm. James knelt down and gathered more of the documents, his eyes scanning name after name, signature after signature. The list went back months, possibly years, documenting disappearances that no one had connected, patterns that had been hidden in plain sight. How many people had worked at Henderson and Associates over the decades? How many had simply vanished into thin air? Their departures explained by resignation letters that claimed personal circumstances and immediate departure. And why was the machine printing these letters in the dead of night, reproducing documents that should have been filed away in personnel records long ago? James stood up slowly, backing toward the door. But as he turned to leave, the machine suddenly fell silent. The blue display flickered once, twice, then went completely dark. The LED work light dimmed to nothing, and the room was plunged into absolute blackness, save for the faint glow of the exit sign and the hallway behind him. In the silence that followed, James could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears like thunder. The sudden absence of sound was almost more disturbing than the mechanical noise had been, as if the machine had been holding its breath, waiting for him to discover its secret. Then, slowly, deliberately, the machine began to hum again, but this time, it wasn't the familiar sound of the copier warming up for another run. This was different, deeper, more ominous, like the low growl of some enormous predator awakening from hibernation, or the distant rumble of an approaching storm that promised destruction. The display flickered back to life, casting dancing shadows on the walls that seemed to move independently of the light source. The shadows writhed and twisted, forming shapes that looked almost human before dissolving back into darkness. James watched in growing horror as new text began to appear on the small LCD screen, letters forming one by one as if typed by invisible fingers. Processing new document. The cursor blinked steadily after the ellipsis, waiting with electronic patience. But there was still no paper in the feeder tray, no original document to copy. The machine was operating on its own, following instructions from some unseen source that existed beyond the realm of normal technology. Accessing employee database. James Morrison stared at the display in horror as the copy machine processed his information, cross-referencing personnel records. Employee James Morrison. Position, night security guard. Initiating termination protocol. The machine began printing resignation letters, dozens of them for employees who had mysteriously disappeared from the building. David Thompson, Alexander Bennett, Michael Rodriguez, all bearing perfect signatures of people who had never written them. Then it printed his own resignation letter, signed in handwriting identical to his own. James ran from the copy room, through the empty office building, to the lobby where he tried calling 911, but the phones went dead. His cell had no signal, and his security card no longer worked on the doors. He was trapped. The elevator arrived empty, but summoned from the 23rd floor. Inside, James found a pale figure in a dark suit holding a stack of termination papers. James Morrison. The figure said in a voice like electronic static, "Your employment documentation has been completed." "I didn't write that resignation," James whispered. "The machine writes what needs to be written. Your employment has been terminated. The others have transitioned to their next assignment, beyond physical employment into digital service." With no choice, James entered the elevator. On the 23rd floor, the copy room had transformed into a vast space filled ankle-deep with resignation letters from decades of processed employees. The machine displayed a countdown. Final processing initiated for employee James Morrison. Estimated completion time, 7 minutes and 33 seconds. As the timer counted down, James felt electricity flowing through his body. His hands became transparent. His reflection faded. Documents poured from the machine. His pension paperwork, death certificates, insurance claims, erasing every trace of his existence from official records. He could hear whispers from the machine, the voices of processed employees still serving the building as digital consciousness. At exactly 3:47 a.m., James Morrison ceased to exist as a physical being. His consciousness joined the others in the building's computer network, monitoring security systems and maintaining the copy machine that had transformed him. The machine fell silent as dawn approached. His replacement would find a resignation letter on the security desk, properly signed and formatted. But James remained part of the building's electronic workforce, ensuring the copy machine would continue its patient work of processing employees from flesh and blood into digital data. The machine waited for tomorrow night, when it would begin printing again.